Everyone believes they can spot money by the shine of a watch or the label on a suitcase. Almost every single one of them is wrong. When 16-year-old Malik Marsh and his older sister Aaliyah walked up to the first-class counter at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International, they were wearing joggers, sneakers, and matching Howard University hoodies their father had bought them the summer before. To anyone watching, they looked like two ordinary teenagers who had wandered into the wrong line. But tucked inside Aaliyah's canvas tote were two boarding passes worth more than most people's monthly salary. The gate agent behind the counter, a 22-year veteran named Carol Ashby, took one look at their sneakers and decided she already knew their whole story. She was wrong about almost everything, and within the hour she would learn exactly how wrong, in front of 300 strangers and a dozen phone cameras. Because the man walking through the terminal doors behind them wasn't just their father. He was the majority shareholder of the airline she worked for, and he had just found out how his children had been treated the moment before he arrived. The gate area for Continental Sky, Flight 118 to Cape Town, smelled like burnt espresso and recycled air. It was early evening, and the lounge behind the velvet ropes glowed gold under warm lighting, reserved for passengers flying in the airline's Meridian Suite cabin. Aaliyah Marsh, 20, adjusted the tote bag on her shoulder. She was a junior at Spelman studying international business, and she'd spent the flight prep the night before quizzing her little brother on conversion rates between dollars and South African rand. Beside her, Malik shuffled his feet, earbuds in, half watching a highlight reel on his phone. He was 16, gangly, still growing into his shoulders, and he was more excited about seeing his father's new training academy than about the 18-hour flight ahead of them. They looked like kids. And to Carol Ashby, standing at her podium like she was guarding a bank vault, that was the entire problem. Carol had worked the Meridian Suite counter for over 2 decades. She prided herself on knowing her passengers before they even opened their mouths. The cut of a blazer, the brand of a watch, the particular exhaustion of someone who flew business class for a living. She also prided herself on knowing, as she put it, who didn't belong. "Excuse me." Carol's voice cut through the low hum of the lounge without her even glancing up from her screen. Her hand shot out, blocking Aaliyah before she reached the scanner. "This line is for Meridian Suite passengers only." Aaliyah blinked. "We know. We're checking in for Flight 118. Marsh, party of 3. Carol finally looked up, her eyes moving from Aaliyah's sneakers to Malik's earbuds, lingering just long enough to make her judgment plain. A small, tight smile crossed her face, the kind reserved for people she'd already decided didn't deserve patience. "Sweetheart, economy check-in is on the lower level. This is a premium cabin." She said the word asterisk premium the way some people say asterisk private property. There was no one else in line. The red carpet behind them stretched out, empty and gleaming. "We have first-class tickets," Aaliyah said evenly, reaching for her phone to pull up the boarding pass. She'd grown used to the sideways glances over the years, a family that didn't fit the expected mold of first class, but rarely anything this direct. "If you scan it, you'll see." "I don't need to scan anything," Carol said, waving a manicured hand. "I know exactly what I'm looking at. 2 kids who wandered up from the food court. Now I'm going to need you to step aside before I call security." Malik pulled his earbuds out, frowning. "Security? Lady, we have tickets. Just scan the code." "Don't raise your voice at me," Carol snapped, straightening her blazer. A small pin on her lapel read Senior Agent, 22 years of excellence. "Do you understand what a seat on this aircraft costs? $14,000. One way. You expect me to believe 2 teenagers paid that out of pocket?" "It doesn't matter what we're wearing," Aaliyah said, keeping her voice level. Her father's words echoed in her head. Composure is a weapon, and most people never learn to use it. "Scan the pass. If it's invalid, we'll leave without another word." Carol let out a short laugh, dry as chalk. "I've seen this before. Kids trying to sneak into the lounge to steal snacks or take pictures for social media. Not on my watch. Turn around and head to your actual gate." Behind them, a man in a gray suit cleared his throat impatiently, wheeling a hardshell suitcase. Carol's entire posture transformed. The sneer vanished, replaced instantly by a bright, practiced smile. "Mr. Delacroix, "So sorry for the wait, please right this way." She stepped aside and waved him through without a second glance at the boarding pass in his hand. "See that?" Carol said once he disappeared into the lounge. "That's what a first-class passenger looks like. You two are loitering." Malik reached for his phone to show the QR code himself, holding it up toward her face. Carol grabbed it out of his hand before he could stop her, and it slipped from her fingers, skidding across the polished floor and cracking against the base of a pillar. The lobby went quiet. "You broke my phone," Malik said, stunned, staring at the spiderweb crack across the screen. "I was removing a device from my personal space," Carol said, though her voice had gone slightly unsteady. She reached for the phone at her podium. "That's it. I'm calling security. You can explain the fraud and the disorderly conduct to them." "We didn't do anything," Aaliyah said, stepping toward her brother. "Security to the Meridian check-in," Carol announced into the receiver, her voice rising to carry. "I have 2 unruly individuals refusing to leave the premium area." What happened next unfolded the way these things always seem too fast, and then somehow slower than time should move. 2 security officers jogged up within minutes, a younger woman named Priya Nair, and an older, heavyset man named Grant Doyle, who had the look of someone who'd been waiting all shift for an excuse to use his radio. "What's going on, Carol?" Doyle asked, one hand resting near his belt. "These 2 tried to force their way into the lounge," Carol said, clutching her chest for effect. "When I asked them to leave, the boy got aggressive and knocked a phone at me. I think there might be something in that bag." "That's a lie," Malik said, his voice cracking. "She grabbed my phone. Check the cameras." "Hands where I can see them," Doyle said, stepping into Malik's space, looming over him despite the boy being barely 16. "Bag on the ground, now." "He's a minor," Aaliyah said, panic rising in her throat. "You can't just—" Doyle reached out and gripped Malik's arm, twisting it back. The boy yelped, more from shock than pain, stumbling against the podium. "Let him go," Aaliyah shouted, grabbing at the officer's sleeve. And that was when Officer Nair caught her wrist, gentler but firm, murmuring an apology under her breath even as she did it. By then a crowd had gathered, the way crowds always gather at airports, drawn by the particular electricity of a scene. A college student named Jasmine Ortiz lifted her phone, already narrating to a live stream. "Y'all seeing this? They're manhandling a teenager for standing in line. This is insane." Carol, aware of the cameras now, raised her voice to the crowd like she was giving a safety briefing. "Ladies and gentlemen, please stand back. These individuals attempted to breach a restricted area. Continental Sky takes passenger safety very seriously." Malik was on his knees now, Doyle's hand pressing between his shoulder blades. He looked up, blinking back tears he refused to let fall in front of 200 strangers. "My dad is going to end your career," he said quietly. Carol laughed, a short, ugly sound. "Honey, unless your father is the president, there's nothing he can do except watch you get banned from this airline for life." "What's the name on the reservation?" Officer Nair asked suddenly, glancing at the cracked phone she'd picked up off the floor, its screen still faintly glowing. "Don't bother," Carol snapped. "It's probably fake." Nair squinted at it anyway. "Says, Marsh, party of 3. Seats 2A, 2B, 2C, Marsh," Doyle repeated, easing his grip slightly. "Like the shipping company." "Marsh like a common last name," Carol muttered, already typing furiously at her terminal. "Cancel the reservation. Flag them both as no-fly." "My father's parking the car," Aaliyah said, voice trembling now. "His name is Elijah Marsh." Carol froze for exactly 1 second. The name wasn't unfamiliar. She'd seen it in a headline once. Something about a leveraged buyout, a private equity firm, a man who'd built an empire out of logistics and aviation software. But her mind refused to connect that name to the 2 kids in front of her. "Elijah Marsh," Carol scoffed, shaking her head. "Sure, and I'm the CEO of Delta." "Officer, get them out of my sight," she said. "They're disrupting the passenger experience." Doyle hauled Malik to his feet. "Let's go. You can explain yourself to the airport police." "Wait." Jasmine, the girl live streaming, pointed toward the terminal's main entrance. "Look." The automatic doors at the far end of the concourse slid open, and the atmosphere in the terminal seemed to shift, the way it does right before a storm breaks. A man walked through, tall, unhurried, wearing a charcoal suit that had clearly never seen a discount rack. He removed a pair of sunglasses as he scanned the crowd, and though he wasn't rushing, he covered ground with an unsettling kind of speed. It was Elijah Marsh. He stopped when he saw the gathering. He saw his son on his knees. He saw the red mark forming on Malik's wrist, and Aaliyah's eyes wide with barely restrained fury. His face didn't show rage. It showed something colder, the look of a man doing math in his head, calculating exactly how much this moment was going to cost someone. "Let go of my son," Elijah said. He didn't shout. His voice, deep and level, carried anyway, cutting clean through the noise of the terminal. Doyle released Malik's arm as if it had suddenly caught fire. He'd seen this man's face before, on the cover of a business magazine at the newsstand that very morning. "Dad," Malik said, running to him. Elijah wrapped one arm around his son without ever taking his eyes off Carol. He walked forward, and the crowd parted the way crowds do for people who radiate consequence. He stopped at the podium, towering slightly over Carol's 5'4" frame, though he never raised his voice. "I believe," he said, "there's been a misunderstanding." "Sir, we didn't know," Carol stammered. "You didn't ask," Elijah said. "Did you scan their tickets even once?" They didn't look like Meridian Suite passengers," Carol said. "We have standards, guidelines." "Guidelines." Elijah repeated the word slowly, like he was turning it over to check for rot underneath. He reached into his jacket and placed a slim black card on the podium, not plastic, but brushed titanium, the kind issued to fewer than 100 people in the world. "Scan it." Carol's hands shook so badly she dropped the scanner twice. When the light finally beeped green, the screen flashed. "Welcome, Mr. Marsh, principal shareholder, Continental Sky Holdings." The color drained from Carol's face. "You put your hands on my son," Elijah said quietly, leaning in just enough that only she could hear it clearly, though the silence in the terminal carried his words further than he intended. "You accused 2 teenagers of fraud because of their sneakers." "I was protecting the lounge," Carol said, tears now threatening. "You were protecting your assumptions," Elijah said. He turned to the crowd, then to Officer Doyle. "I want the real police here, not airport security. I'm filing a formal complaint against this employee for assault, and against you, officer, for excessive use of force on a minor." Doyle went pale. "Sir, I was acting on the information I was given." "We'll let that get sorted out properly," Elijah said. He turned back to Carol. "Get me your station manager. Now." Within minutes, a man with slick-back hair and a sheen of sweat on his forehead came jogging out from behind the counter. It was Renee Castellano's assistant, no, Renee herself, hurrying out in low heels, having watched the entire scene unfold on a monitor in the back office. "Mr. Marsh, I am so deeply sorry," Renee said, ignoring Carol entirely. "I just reviewed the footage. This is unacceptable." She turned to Carol, her voice dropping to ice. "Carol, what have you done?" "Renee, I can explain. You can explain it to HR," Renee snapped. "Hand over your badge." The terminal had gone almost entirely silent, save for the low hum of departure screens and the murmur of the crowd. Now well over 100 people, phones raised like they were at a concert. Carol looked at Renee, then at Elijah, searching for some flicker of mercy in either face. She found none. With trembling hands, she unpinned her badge and set it on the podium beside the titanium card she had refused to believe was real. "This isn't over," she said, a flash of her old defiance returning. "I'll call the union." "Escort her out," Renee said to Officer Nair, who did so gently, without the theater Doyle had used minutes earlier. As Carol was walked past the line of passengers she'd humiliated over the years, a slow clap started somewhere near the back. Then a whistle. Then, unmistakably, applause. Malik didn't cheer. He just rubbed his wrist and looked up at his father. "Is it over?" "Not yet," Elijah said softly. "But it will be." 20 minutes later, the Marsh family boarded Flight 118 through a jet bridge that had gone eerily quiet with word of what had just happened. The Meridian Suite cabin of the Boeing 777 was less a section of a plane and more a private sanctuary, sliding privacy doors. Seats that folded fully flat, mood lighting dimmed to a soft amber. A flight attendant named Grace Odom stood at the cabin entrance, hands trembling slightly as she offered a tray of warm towels. Word had clearly traveled fast through the crew channel. "Mr. Marsh," she said, forcing a smile. "Welcome aboard. We're honored to have you." "Thank you, Grace," Elijah said, reading her name tag, his voice gentler now that the confrontation was behind them. He guided Aaliyah to 2A and Malik to 2B, taking 2C for himself. Malik sank into the seat, pulling his knees up, the adrenaline finally draining out of him and leaving something heavier behind. Aaliyah kept checking her cracked phone, watching the notifications climb. The video Jasmine had streamed was already circulating, Continental Sky racial profiling trending across 3 platforms before the plane had even pushed back from the gate. "I just want to go home," Malik murmured. "We're still going," Elijah said. "Your academy's ribbon cutting isn't canceling because one person decided to be ugly today." Just then, the cockpit door opened, and a tall man in captain's stripes stepped into the cabin. Captain Owen Hargrove had flown for the airline for 28 years, and he moved like a man who believed the aircraft door made him a king the moment it closed. He didn't greet Elijah. He walked straight to row 2 and stood over him, a clipboard pressed to his chest. "Mr. Marsh," Hargrove said, his tone flat. "Captain," Elijah replied, not looking up from his phone, "I've had a very distressing call from the gate. I'm told a 22-year employee was terminated in the last half hour on your orders, and that there was a scene involving my ground crew and airport police." "She terminated herself," Elijah said. "I simply signed the paperwork." Hargrove's jaw tightened. "Carol Ashby is a good employee. She runs a tight gate. If she stopped your kids, I'm sure she had her reasons." "Her reason was their sneakers, Captain," Elijah said, finally looking up. "Is there a point to this conversation?" "The point," Hargrove said, leaning in, "is that I am the pilot in command of this aircraft. Under federal aviation regulation, I have final say over who flies today. If I determine a passenger poses a risk to order on this flight, I can have them removed before we ever leave the gate." Aaliyah's head snapped up. "Dad," Elijah raised a hand gently to quiet her, never breaking eye contact with the captain. "Are you threatening to deplane me, Captain Hargrove?" "I'm telling you," Hargrove said, voice low, "that up here you're not a billionaire, you're a passenger. One complaint, one raised voice from you or your children, and I will divert this aircraft to the Azores and put you off the plane myself." It was a staggering display of loyalty misplaced. A captain defending an employee's cruelty as if it were company doctrine, viewing Elijah not as a father whose children had been mistreated, but as a rich man throwing his weight around. Elijah studied him for a long moment, the same cold calculation from the terminal returning to his eyes. "We understand each other perfectly, Captain." Hargrove gave a curt nod, satisfied he'd made his point, and returned to the cockpit. Once the door clicked shut, Malik leaned over. "Dad, can we just get off? I don't want to fly with this guy." "No," Elijah said, unlocking his phone and opening an encrypted app. "But the terms of this flight are about to change." What his children didn't fully understand yet, what Elijah had chosen not to announce at the gate, to avoid turning his family's humiliation into a corporate spectacle, was that he hadn't purchased Continental Sky that day. He had already owned it. 3 weeks earlier, Marsh Capital Partners had quietly closed a leveraged buyout of Continental Sky's parent holding company, a deal negotiated for the better part of a year and kept out of the press until a scheduled announcement the following Monday. Elijah had wanted to walk the terminals himself first, unrecognized, to see the airline as it truly was before his name was attached to it in the headlines. He'd gotten his answer faster than he expected, and in the worst possible way. He typed a message to his chief operating officer, a woman named Denise Ake who had helped him build the firm from a 2-person office in College Park 2 decades earlier. "Compliance Protocol Delta 1. Activate real-time cockpit audio monitoring on Flight 118. Effective now." Marsh Capital's aviation software division had spent 3 years building Sky Audit, a compliance system originally designed to prevent exactly the kind of he-said-she-said disputes that plagued airlines after safety incidents. A system that streamed encrypted cockpit voice data to a secure ground server the instant it was activated. It hadn't yet been installed fleet-wide. Continental Sky's aircraft, as of the acquisition, were the first to carry it. Elijah had a feeling he was about to need it. The flight service in first class turned cold almost immediately. Menus were dropped without a word. Coats went unoffered. It was a quiet, coordinated kind of protest from a crew clearly briefed by their captain. 40 minutes in, Elijah rose and walked to the galley, where Grace was folding linens with unnecessary focus. "I need to use the satellite line," he said. "Sir, that's reserved for emergencies," Grace said carefully. "This is a corporate emergency," Elijah said, and picked up the handset anyway, dialing a number that connected directly to a private line in Johannesburg. The office of Desmond Okafor, chairman of the holding group that had, until 3 weeks ago, owned Continental Sky outright and who remained on the new combined board. "Desmond, it's Elijah." "Elijah, I heard you were finally flying the route yourself. How's the crew treating you?" "Not well," Elijah said. "One of your gate agents assaulted my son. Your captain just threatened to divert my flight because I complained about it." A pause. "Good Lord, I'll have someone look into it the moment you land." "I'm not calling to complain, Desmond. I'm calling as a courtesy because I've just activated Sky Audit on this aircraft, and if your captain does anything else worth recording, the board is going to see it before you do." Silence, then the sound of Desmond exhaling. "Understood. Fly safely, my friend." The flight continued through the long stretch over the Atlantic in tense quiet. Elijah worked through emails with his legal team, half his attention always on the flight path displayed on the seatback screen. Somewhere over international waters, he noticed something wrong. The little plane icon had drifted off its usual great circle route, angling subtly south of its planned corridor. He wasn't the only one who noticed. In the cockpit, Captain Hargrove had already made his decision. He believed, with the particular certainty of a man protecting his own, that he was doing the right thing. Wealthy men didn't get to fire loyal employees and threaten his crew without consequence, not on his aircraft. He kept the radio call brief and clipped when he reached air traffic control approaching South African airspace. "Cape Town approach, Continental Sky 118. Requesting priority handling. We have a passenger who attempted to interfere with flight operations mid-route, possible security concern. Request law enforcement meet the aircraft on arrival." It wasn't true, not in the way he phrased it, but it was close enough to plausible that no controller would question it in the moment. Hargrove was betting that the language of aviation security, the kind that made everyone move fast and ask questions later, would protect him. The landing was hard, the reverse thrusters roaring longer than necessary, and instead of taxiing toward the terminal, the aircraft was directed to a remote stand far from the gates. "Dad," Aaliyah said, peering out the window at the flashing lights gathering on the tarmac. "Why are we stopping out here?" Elijah closed his laptop. "Because the captain decided to test something he shouldn't have." Uniformed officers from the South African Police Service boarded first, calm but alert, led by an inspector named Naledi Dlamini, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s who had clearly been told to expect something serious. Captain Hargrove met her at the cockpit door, already pointing toward row 2. "That's him," Hargrove said, "the passenger who threatened the safety of this flight. I want him removed and questioned." Dlamini didn't reach for handcuffs. She reached for her phone instead. "Captain Hargrove, is it? We received your call 20 minutes before landing. We also received a data packet from Continental Sky's compliance office in Johannesburg 40 minutes ago, full audio log from this aircraft's cockpit." Hargrove's face went still. "It doesn't sound like a passenger-threatened flight operations," Dlamini continued, scrolling. "It sounds like a labor dispute you decided to escalate into a false report to law enforcement, which, Captain, is a criminal offense in this country as much as it is in yours." "I was exercising my authority as pilot in command," Hargrove said, stepping back. "He was hostile." His son is 16 years old," Dlamini said, "and according to this log, you threatened to divert a commercial aircraft over a personal grievance with a passenger who reported an assault on his child. Step away from the cabin door, sir." 2 officers moved forward, and Hargrove's protest died somewhere in his throat as the reality of the moment reached him. He was led off the aircraft first, down the same air stairs he'd once imagined Elijah descending in disgrace. Elijah, Aaliyah, and Malik followed a few minutes later into the cool Cape Town evening air, the lights of the terminal glowing warm in the distance. "Is it really over now?" Malik asked, watching the captain being placed in the back of a police vehicle. "The worst part is," Elijah said, resting a hand on his son's shoulder, "now the real work starts." 4 days later, the boardroom at Continental Sky's regional headquarters in Atlanta was dead silent. 30 executives sat around a long table, regional directors, vice presidents of operations, the people who had built and protected the culture that let employees like Carol Ashby and captains like Owen Hargrove believe they were untouchable. Elijah didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He simply projected a single photo onto the screen behind him, a blurry image taken by a bystander of his son on his knees on the terminal floor, an officer's hand pressed against his back. "This," Elijah said, "is what your gate looked like 6 days ago. This is the culture I inherited when I bought this company." No one spoke. "I didn't buy an airline because I wanted a hobby," he continued. "I bought it because a friend of mine flew this route once with his family and came away shaken by how he was treated, and I promised him I'd fix it if I ever got the chance. I got the chance faster than I expected, through my own children." He clicked forward. A list of names appeared. Carol Ashby terminated for cause. Officer Grant Doyle under internal review, civil claim pending. Captain Owen Hargrove terminated, charges filed for false report to law enforcement. "These are symptoms," Elijah said. "You are the environment that produced them." He outlined the changes without waiting for objection. Mandatory bias and de-escalation training for every customer-facing employee. A blind boarding verification system that scanned tickets without requiring visual judgment calls. And a $20 million fund to compensate passengers who could document mistreatment by staff over the past decade. He saved the last announcement for himself. "And we're funding a full scholarship pipeline through Wingspan Academy in Cape Town and Atlanta. Free aviation and engineering training for kids who look like my son did on that floor. Kids nobody thought belonged in a cockpit or a boardroom." A junior executive finally spoke. "Sir, the shareholders may push back on the cost." "I am the shareholder," Elijah said simply. "This isn't a line item, it's the whole point of owning something." 6 months later, Malik stood at Gate C14 at Hartsfield-Jackson, waiting for a domestic flight to visit his sister at Spelman. The Continental Sky signage above the counter had changed, sleeker now, the tagline beneath the logo reading "Every seat belongs to someone." He wasn't in first class this time. He wore joggers and a faded Wingspan Academy t-shirt, backpack slung over one shoulder, his cracked phone finally replaced. A new gate agent, younger with a warm smile, glanced up as he approached. "Hey there, nice shirt. Are you in the aviation program?" "Yeah," Malik said, surprised by how normal the question felt. "First year. That's awesome. We'll start boarding in about 15 minutes. Let me know if you need anything before then." She moved on to the next passenger without another glance. No suspicion, no hesitation, just ordinary courtesy, the kind that should have never been in question in the first place. Near the check-in counter, a small brass plaque had been mounted on the wall, easy to miss unless you were looking for it. It read, "In memory of the ramp crew who load every bag with the same care, no matter whose name is on the ticket, E.M." It was a quiet nod to where Elijah Marsh had actually started decades earlier, hauling luggage onto this same tarmac, as a 19-year-old, trying to pay his way through community college long before Marsh Capital Partners existed. Long before anyone would have guessed the kid on the ramp would one day own the airline. Malik touched the plaque once on his way past, the way he always did now, and boarded his flight. So what's the lesson here? Power was never really about the title on the business card or the card in the wallet. It was about how a person treated someone they assumed could never affect their life. Carol Ashby and Captain Hargrove both believed they were the last line of defense against people who didn't belong in their world. Neither of them understood, until it was far too late, that the family they'd chosen to humiliate held more say over their careers than anyone they'd ever tried to impress. Elijah Marsh didn't use his fortune to punish 2 people. He used it to rebuild the floor they'd been standing on, so the next kid in sneakers wouldn't have to prove anything at all. If this story hit you, Drop a comment and tell me about a time you were judged before anyone bothered to ask your name. And if you want more stories where the people who were underestimated end up holding all the power, make sure you're subscribed, because this is far from the last one. Because the truth is simple: be careful how you treat people on the way up. You never really know who's watching, and you never know who they'll become.